You can start now.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Bahram Saroush. I coordinate the campaign for the boycott of the Islamic regime of Iran. I coordinate the campaign for the boycott of the Islamic regime of Iran, which, as well as calling for a world political and diplomatic boycott and isolation of the regime in Iran, seeks the prosecution of the heads of the Islamic Republic regime of Iran for their crimes against humanity, including the 1988 massacre of political prisoners in Iran. So, and today I'll be the moderator of this conference. But I would like to begin with a good piece of news, which was announced just this morning, and that is this: that Swedish prosecutors have now formally indicted Hamidnoury to be prosecuted on charges of violations of international law, serious crimes, and murders committed in Iran in 1988. This was announced earlier today, and I'd like to congratulate everyone. Today I'll be the moderator of this conference. But I would like to begin with a good piece of news, which was announced just this morning, and that is that Swedish prosecutors have now formally indicted Hamidnoury to be prosecuted on charges of violations of international law, serious crimes, and murders committed in Iran. I'm sorry, I'll just continue. So I'd like to congratulate everyone who've been campaigning for the prosecution of perpetrators of crimes against humanity in the Islamic Republic regime of Iran, and especially to congratulate Iraj Mestaghi, who is here with us today, who has tirelessly been fighting for the case of Hamidnoury. On behalf of the International Committee Against Executions, who have organized this important conference, I'd like to welcome our speakers, as well as the participants in the room and our audience, whether those following the program on the YouTube channel of the International Committee Against Executions or watching it live on New Channel TV. This conference has been called to examine the significance of the impending trial of Hamidnoury in Sweden, both from an international human rights, political and legal perspective, and also with regard to its implications for the movement for justice, i.e. the redress for those families who cruelly lost their loved ones at the hands of the Islamic Republic during its 42-year existence. The significance of this trial is that it could open the way for the prosecution of other perpetrators of crimes against humanity in the Islamic Republic, including Ebrahim Raisi, whom the Islamic Republic recently appointed as president in a fraudulent circus of an election, which was boycotted by the overwhelming majority of the electorate in Iran. Hamidnoury, as many will know, has been in detention in Sweden since November 2019, awaiting trial for his role in the 1988 massacre of political prisoners in Iran. He was arrested on 9th of November 2019 as he arrived at Stockholm airport for a visit. His trial is due to start on 10th of August 2021, i.e. in a couple of weeks' time, and is expected to last until April next year, 2022. Just a few words about the order of the event today. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers who will first each speak for 5 minutes, followed by 2 minutes of any additional points they would like to make or give feedback on the contributions of the other speakers. There'll also be a 1-minute opportunity at the end for each speaker for any final words. We aim to keep the event to the 1-hour limit. The order of the speakers are Iraj Mestaghi, Ulrike Becker, Safia Eskandari, Marcus Wallina, Mina Ahadi. And I would like just, before I give the mic to the first speaker, just say a few words in Farsi, Persian, because we have this program is being live streamed and also to a Farsi-speaking audience, and also on New Channel TV, a 24-hour TV network which broadcasts to mainly a Farsi-speaking audience. از طرف اسم من بهرام سروشه، من هماهنگ کننده کمپین برای بایکوت رژیم اسلامی ایران هستم و امروز از طرف کمیته بین‌المللی علیه اعدام این جلسه رو اداره میکنم و همه حاضرین در جلسه، به سخنرانان و به تمام شما بینندگان عزیز که این برنامه رو چه در یوتیوب کمیته بین‌المللی علیه اعدام و چه در کانال جدید دارین دنبال میکنین خوش آمد میگم. اهمیت این کنفرانس اینه که در رابطه با محاکمه حمید نوری همونطور که ممکنه مطلع باشید دستگیر شده، کسیه که در اعدام‌های گسترده زندانیان سیاسی در کشتار تابستان 67 شرکت داشته، نقش داشته و از سال نوامبر 2019 ایشون وقتی که اومده بودن به سوئد دستگیر شدن و الان در حبس در سوئد هستن و دادگاه حمید نوری در 10 اوت امسال در سوئد شروع خواهد شد. امروز خبر خوش این بود که کیفرخواست رسمی دادستان سوئد علیه حمید نوری صادر شد و حمید نوری به خاطر کشتارهای نقشش در اون کشتارها مورد محاکمه قرار خواهد گرفت و این دادگاه تا از 10 اوت تا آوریل سال آینده، سال میلادی آینده ادامه خواهد داشت. در برنامه امروز ما سخنرانانی داریم که به انگلیسی یا آلمانی صحبت میکنن و من در طول برنامه خلاصه‌ای از صحبتاشون رو براتون نقل میکنم. از اولین سخنران این برنامه میخوام شروع کنم. اولا تبریک میگم به ایرج مصداقی عزیز که به خاطر این پیروزی، به خاطر این کیفرخواستی که امروز اعلام شد و تمام کسانی که سالهاست دارن میجنگن برای به محاکمه کشاندن حمید نوری و سران جمهوری اسلامی و این میتونه آغازی باشه برای محاکمه ابراهیم رئیسی که خودش جزو هیئت مرگ نقش اساسی داشت در کشتار این زندانیان سیاسی. برای این واقع خیلی مهمیه. من الان به برنامه رو به انگلیسی ادامه میدم. I'd like to ask ایرج مصداقی, our first speaker, to take the mic, please.
Thank you so much for having me in your fantastic program, and I also congratulate you and the others, all Iranian, all people seeking justice in Iran. I think this is a very important day in the history of Iran. This is the first time a criminal will be stand before the court and he will be tried. And of course, this is the first step in the right road, and we should go on. Hamid Nouri is the first man that he will be tried. Of course, he is not the last one. We just started. And I'm sure that we will continue this way. And as you said, Hamid Nouri, he was involved in the massacre in 1988. He himself was in death corridor. I saw him several times when he was among those who sent our fellow prisoners and our beloved ones to the gallows. They were after killing a group of prisoners, they were celebrating that. Hamid Nouri, he himself, came to the death corridor and they were celebrating. He himself brought us cake and cookies. He offered us and he asked us to take one and to make our mouths sweet. This is what we call when we want to have a party. And he wanted to put pressure on us. Hamid Nouri was the one who called the name of prisoners. he put them in a queue and he sent them to the gallows. He himself said to the guards, take them to their unit. It was a code between them. It means take them to the amphitheater where they hang the prisoners up there. I was in the death corridor for many days. I was blindfolded, but I could see still what was going on there. Hamidnoury, he was trapped by us. He was brought to Sweden and he was arrested in Arlanda airport. He didn't know that what will be happened in Sweden. He came to Sweden and all over Europe before. For 7 years, he was traveling to Europe. He was traveling to Germany, Italy, and Switzerland. But it was the last time that he came to Europe. And it would be the last time for him. We hope that he will be in prison. And we hope that he will pay the price. Of course, for me, I'm not looking for revenge. I'm looking for justice. And I'm looking for the truth. This is more important for me. We want to know what happened then. We want to know where our beloved ones were buried. We don't know yet. The family, they don't know where their beloved one were buried. We don't know what happened then. We don't know what was happening, how they killed our beloved ones. This is that he can say. He can expose. Of course, like others, he is not going to talk. But still we hope that he talk about the atrocities, the crimes against humanity. As far as I know, he's not. And still he insists that he didn't do anything. Almost 100 plaintiffs and witnesses are in this case, and they gave their testimony. The Swedish authorities, they investigated them, interrogated them. They have enough evidence for that. This is why for the last 20 months, he was in custody with special restriction that the prosecutor asked the judge and the court. Every 4 weeks. And now the time has come. He will be tried in August 10th. The trial will be started. It's a very important day for us. And I think something has been changed in the international law. You know, this is why this case has come to the books of law in Sweden. We know that it's very important. And, you know, everybody is looking, not just here, also inside Iran. This is a victory for all of us, for Iranian, for those who seek justice. And I'm sure that we will be succeeded. And the justice seeker will be succeeded. We made something in the history, and I'm very happy to do that. This is for all of us. And I hope that it continue. You know, after Hamidnoury will be sentenced, then we will ask the international law, how come his commander can be the president of Iran? He is, or he will be sentenced by a Swedish court. And you know he was arrested because of universal jurisdiction. And this is what we can ask for Raisi, his boss, his commander. How come he can be the president? The one who was working for him is a criminal. Of course, he himself is a criminal. He ordered to kill the prisoners. And now our days is coming. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Iraj Mestaghi, for that contribution. And I will just add, before I give a brief summary of what you said in Farsi, just a key point. I would like to add that Iraj, of course, as you saw from what he said, you heard, he was imprisoned in Qazl, Hisar, Evin, and Gohardash prisons under the Islamic Republic for 10 years, from 1981 to 1991. And he himself survived the 1988 mass executions of political prisoners in Iran. And after release, he had to flee Iran, and he came to Sweden in 1994. And since then, he's continued his work for human rights and has written extensively on the 1988 mass execution of political prisoners in Iran. And as he himself was instrumental in tracking and making possible the arrest of Hamidnoury upon his entry to Sweden in November 2019. And he himself is a plaintiff in this case. Okay, thank you so much, Iraj, for that. I know you need to leave soon because you are very wanted today by the media. You need to give a TV interview. And I'll just say a few words in Farsi about the key points Iraj mentioned. من به فارسی چند کلمه اینجا میگم، نکاتی که آقای مصداقی اینجا گفتن. یکی این که ایشون گفتن که در این حال تبریک میگن همین کفرخواستی که امروز در سوئد اعلام شد به طور رسمی از طرف دادستانی، تبریک میگه به تمام مردم و یه پیروزی برای همه کسانی که برای این جنگیده بودن. و در این حال در مورد تجربه مستقیم خودشون در زندان، در دوره 10 سالی که تو زندان بودن و به ویژه در دوره تابستان 67 میگم و چطوری حمیدنوردی حتی جشن گرفته بود بعد از اینکه زندانی‌ها رو اعدام کرده بودن و شیرینی آورده بودن برای که بگن که باید دهنتون شیرین کنه به خاطر این جنایاتی که ما کردیم. این برای این بود که فشار بیارم برای روی باقی زندانیان. در این حال ایرج مصداقی گفتن که ما دنبال انتقام نیستیم. هدف از این محاکمات یافتن حقیقته. ما دنبال حقیقت هستیم و میخوایم بدونیم عزیزان ما کجا دفن شدن و تمام حقیقت رو میخوایم بدونیم. و آقای مصداقی گفتن که 20 ماه در مورد حمیدنوردی گفتن که 20 ماه در زندان، هر 4 هفته زندانی بودن بازداشت حمیدنوردی باید تمدید می شده. یعنی یه جنگ خیلی طولانی بوده برای اینکه تا اینجا برسیم و ایشون گفتن که مطمئن هستن که پیروز خواهیم شد و این پیروزی برای همه ماست و چون این دادگاه تحت یک قانونی به نام Universal Jurisdiction، یعنی یک ابزار حقوقی به نام Universal Jurisdiction، یعنی میشه ترجمه کرد به عنوان قضاوت فراگیر یا یونیورسال، که خیلی از کشورها و من جمله سوئد امضا کردن اینو و اینو دارن این ابزار رو و این میتونه آغازی باشه برای محاکمه رئیسی به عنوان رئیس کل این جنایاتی که اتفاق افتاد در اون موقع و این سرآغاز به محاکمه کشاندن جنایتکاری مثل ابراهیم رئیسی میتونه باشه. برای این نکات خیلی خوبی بود که آقای مصداقی گفتن و خیلی تشکر میکنم از ایشون. خیلی ممنون از شما And I'll now go to the next speaker. Just before I hand the mic to Ulrike Becker, which we are very delighted to have here as one of our speakers, and we are very grateful that she could participate in this important conference. Ulrike is a historian and head of research at the Mideast Freedom Forum Berlin, or MFFB. She is MFFB's expert on Iran and responsible for research, press releases, media reports, and briefings for journalists and politicians. She works on education programs against anti-Semitism and organizes public events and lectures. So it's great to have you with us today, Ulrike Becker. Please take the mic.
Hello, thank you very much for the invitation to this important event on the occasion of the trial of Hamid-Nouri. And I hope that this trial will receive a great deal of attention and that it will set an example for a new Iran policy in Europe. Because this is what we need. And I hope that this process will once again make it drastically clear to a European public what kind of regime we are dealing with in Iran and what therefore needs to change in the European Union's Iran policy. We are dealing with an Islamist regime whose actions are based on an ideology, and this ideology is anti-Western, anti-Semitic, misogynistic, homophobic, expansionist, and aggressive. The reason why we criticize European policy is that it turns a blind eye to these facts. German and European policy is based on illusions. And one of these illusions is the assumption that the Islamic Republic is pursuing political goals that are compatible with those of Western democracies. For example, one hopes that the Iranian regime will renounce to build nuclear weapons if it gets something in return. Iran, however, violates the nuclear deal, the JCPOA, in a number of ways. The regime is playing for time and will not abandon its goal of nuclear weaponization. With the conclusion of the nuclear agreement, Iran's foreign policy has not moderated. On the contrary, since the summer of 2015, Iran has been more aggressive in its approach to the region, aggressively exerting its influence on neighboring countries, particularly in Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, and Yemen. The money it got through the nuclear deal is funding these aggressive policies. And the second illusion of the European policy is the assumption that the regime is divided between moderate reformers, with whom the nuclear agreement was negotiated on the one hand, and hardliners around the powerful Revolutionary Guards on the other. This supposed split is seen as an opportunity for the European policy to strengthen the supposedly moderate forces. And Hassan Rouhani was seen as such a reformer, as was Mohammad Khatami before him. But Rouhani has never reformed anything in his 8 years in office. On the contrary, the regime's repressive practices have intensified during this period. The same is true of Iran's aggressive expansionist course in the region. And European policy towards the Iranian regime, however, has for decades followed the myth of the reformers who must be supported against a faction of hardliners. In order not to provide the latter with a pretext for further hardening the system, the doctrine derived from this was that Iran should not be touched too harshly and that dialogue and above all economic relations should be maintained at all costs. On this policy of negotiations, of concessions and of partnership has failed. The regime in Iran cannot be reformed and it will not change its policy. It follows its Islamist logic and ideology. And this ideology in Iran can only be maintained through the use of massive repression. Only with terror can the regime assert itself against its own people. The dictatorship in Tehran is war against its own people. And so the problems that we face with the nuclear programs and the expansionist policy in the region can only be solved in the medium term with a democratic Iran. Therefore, Europe should, in its own interest, but also out of solidarity with the people in Iran, because of this, we need a 180-degree turnaround in Iran policy. No more support for the Iranian regime, no more congratulations on elections, and no more concessions. Instead, official support for the democratic and secular Iranian opposition in exile and in Iran itself. European politicians should publicly declare that they support the opposition. They should invite opposition members to parliaments and governments and organize conferences where the opposition can organize and meet. And any human rights violations in Iran, and especially the execution of members of the opposition, should be met with drastic sanctions. And in this context, the trial of Hamidnoury is extremely important. The Iranian regime's human rights crimes must be punished, and therefore the trial of Hamidnoury must be carried out to the end as planned, and it should be followed by other trials, as Iraj Mestashi also mentioned, or representative of the regime who were involved in torture and murder of members of the opposition and who are in Europe should be charged and sentenced according to the principle of world law, and that makes it possible to have processes against everyone who was involved in torture and crimes against humanity. Yes, this was it for the beginning. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ulrike, for that. Very good points you raised. I'll say a few words in Farsi of what you said. من چند خلاصه خیلی کوتاه نکاتی که اولریکه گفت. ایشون گفتن که اولا تشکر میکنن که ایشون رو دعوت کردیم اینجا اومدن و فکر میکنن که محاکمه حمیدنوری میتونه سرآغازی باشه برای محاکمه سران دیگر کسایی دیگه که سران جمهوری اسلامی که جرم مرتکب شدن علیه بشریت. و در این حال این مسئله گفتن کمک میکنه که برای افکار عمومی، برای مردم دنیا ببینن که با چه حکومتی طرفن و چطوری رفتار میکنه با مردم. و ایشون گفتن که سیاست آلمان و اروپا برای توهم استواره. یه بخشش اینه، یه توهم اینه که فکر میکنن که اهدافی که جمهوری اسلامی دنبال میکنه همون اهدافیه که دموکراسی‌های غربی دارن دنبال میکنن. و نکته دیگه این که فکر میکنن که این حکومت قابل اصلاحه، یعنی دو تا جناح داره، یه جناح به اصطلاح اصولگرا و یه جناح اصلاح طلب. ولی نگاه بکنیم 8 سال روحانی تو قدرت بوده و هیچ اصلاحاتی صورت نگرفت. نه تنها اون بلکه مردم سرکوب شدن، در منطقه هم علیه مردم کار کردن. و ایشون گفتن در این حال که این حکومت علیه مردم لبنان، عراق، سوریه و یمن از پولی که از برجام به دستش اومد استفاده کرد، برای سرکوب مردم تو منطقه استفاده کرد. و ایشون گفتن که این سیاست دولت‌های اروپایی و آلمان شکست خورده است و به خاطر اینکه این حکومت قابل اصلاح نیست و این حکومت جمهوری اسلامی در حال جنگ با مردم خودشه و فقط یه ایران دموکراتیک میشه مسئله هسته‌ای رو حل کرد. و میگه راهی که جلوی روی دولت‌های غربی اینه که اولا تبریک نگن وقتی که کسی انتصاب میشه به عنوان رئیس دولت. دوما از اپوزیسیون دموکراتیک و سکولار در ایران هم تو داخل ایران و خارج حمایت کنن، به برنامه‌ها با کنفرانس‌ها دعوتشون کنن. در این حال اگه اعدامی دولت در ایران صورت میپذیره از طرف دولت، اونو با تحریم‌های شدید روبرو کنن، عکس العملشون این باشه. و به نظر ایشون محاکمه حمیدنوردی باید حتما ادامه بکنه و سایرین هم کسانی دیگری هم به همین ترتیب به محاکمه کشیده بشن. اینا نکات اصلی بود که اوریکه اینا رو گفت و خیلی ما تشکر میکنیم از ایشان. Thank you so much, Ulrike, for that contribution.
Bahram, you are muted.
Yes, I just realized that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I would like now to invite our next speaker. We are delighted to have here with us Safiye Eskandari. I'll say a few words about Safiye. Safiye Eskandari is the partner of Karim Naderi Faizabad. He was a political prisoner, Karim, who was executed during the summer 1988 massacre of political prisoners in Iran. Karim was convicted and executed by the same death commission in which Ebrahim Raisi, the current so-called president-elect of the Islamic Republic, was a member. And Safiye Eskandari is among those families who are seeking justice. They're seeking justice for their loved ones against those who ordered and carried out the 1988 massacres in Iran. Safiye Eskandari recently came forward, like many other bereaved families in Iran, to submit her, her indictment against this regime. And I think it is the courageous action of people like Safiye that is paving the way for bringing the heads of the Iran's Islamic regime to justice. And Safiye Eskandari, we are delighted to have you here with us. And please take the mic.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. First of all, I need to say thank you to Mina Ahadi for inviting me to this video conference. Also, many thanks to Iraj Mesagi, who bravely takes responsibility to follow up on this matter. As you mentioned, my name is Safiye Eskandari, and Karim Naderi was my ex-husband. In 1985, I got married to Karim. Just 4 months after our marriage, Karim had received a phone call from the detention center Sepah Pasdaran Varami, who called him for some questions. When he decided to go there, I said, please don't go. It could be dangerous. He replied that I did not do anything wrong. Don't worry. We went there together. But at the entrance, they did not let me go in with him. I was told by guard that they ask just basic question and that they needed his birth certificate. They kept him there, and I came back home and brought the document to them. Then they forced me to leave the station. For a few days, I came back to that place, but they did not answer my question. For example, why do they not release Karim, or why I do not have a right to visit him. One day I waited outside the building. Suddenly, I noticed that my husband came out in a patrol car with 3 security guards. I was so excited to see him, and I tried to talk to him, but the guard would not let me do it. Karim was also not happy that I saw him in this situation. He was not in good health. The evidence showed that he was tortured. His face and neck was bruised, and his face was pale. The next time when I came back, a guard said that Karim is not here anymore. They had transferred him to Evin prison, where is one of the big prisons in Tehran. When I got angry and shouted what happened to him, they kept me for a few hours in a temporary cell and frightened me by telling me that they arrested me or another family member. Karim received a 1.5 year sentence because he was interested in Iran Communist Party and was active with activities such as financial support to political prisoners, family, and attending mountain hiking groups. During that time, I was allowed to meet him every 2 weeks for 15 minutes behind the glass window. In 1988, when his sentence was finished, we waited to celebrate his freedom, but instead of that, suddenly the prisoners' meeting stopped for all the family. There were some gossip that prisoners had received the death penalty. We could not believe it. The prisoners' family tried to gather, but atmosphere was too risky. We were threatened that if we did something, the situation might get worse. We wanted to go to Qom and hand a letter to Hossein Ali Montazeri. On the motorway, we were followed by patrol cars who forced the driver to stop, and we tear the letter up and ate them because we were afraid they take the letter. They took us to Kahrizak, a detention center near Tehran, where is famous for the torture of prisoners in 2009. Then we gave a plea not to do anything. Afterward, the government started to inform families that the prisoners were being executed. In some families, this was one individual, but in some families, unfortunately, a few members got executed. They gave my husband's clothes to one of our relatives on the street, far from Evin prison, and said that we were not allowed to have a funeral. Nobody was allowed to our house to have sympathy with us and inform other people. No public display or mourning. No last will, no burial location. Later, I met a few of his prison friends said. They said that Karim was in the first group who got executed. They just had a few minutes session. No court or access to a lawyer, just the famous question. Do you believe Islam? Will you have a contribution with us? Do you believe in Wilayat Faqih? The authority did not say where his grave is. After years, when I wanted to get married, I received just a death certificate for Behesht Zahra. I found out that Khavaran is a place where many prisoners' bodies are in mass grave. A few times I went there. Once they arrested me and threatened me. They told me that if I go again, something bad might be happen to my family. Indeed, it is not easy to talk about all my painful memories in a few minutes. The reason why in condemnation of Hamidnoury is important is that the Islamic government soon after the revolution started to kill, torture, and kidnap thousands of innocent people just because they did not agree with their state ideology and policy, and never were they arrested. Hamidnoury is one person in the court, but it will be symbolic for demanding justice. It is an example of how one day authorities in Iran must answer to the public, to the families, why they brutally took many lives. It is my right to see one of my husband killer is in court. I have suffered from the pain of loss almost 33 years. But it is not just me. They took the life of a person and this dream and his dreams and future. The Islamic government committed a massive crime, punished and tortured thousands a family as well. During all years, I could see how Karim's execution was tragic for his family, brothers, sisters. When they heard that one of the killers was arrested, they were happy that at least one of them is in prison. This is a big moment for us. It is true, Raisi and another of the group who were in charge are still in power. But this court can show all of them you cannot escape from justice. Many criminals years later got arrested in Rwanda, in Auschwitz, and were prosecuted. Nobody can say it was just an order. They believe it, and it is their ideology and benefit. I understand that still many families who are living in Iran do not want to say anything, as they are afraid that testimony will influence their life security, education, job, and so on. This trial is just the beginning of demanding justice. I am pretty sure that it will inform many people about the tragedy in Iran. I give permission to Iraj Mestaqi to define my right to legal action. I believe this is an important opportunity to show all the world how thousands of people have been killed in Iran, and for years the Islamic government just ignored it. This condemnation of Hamidnoury gives all of us hope that justice can be served for all families. Many thanks for this opportunity have you given me.
Thank you so much for that, Safiya, and for so bravely speaking about all the pain that you have suffered, and really speaking for a lot of people, for thousands of families, who have lost their loved ones and are in the same situation. And this is just the beginning of a movement for justice, for the bereaved families, seeking answers and for the crimes, the horrendous crimes which were committed and are among the genocides, the biggest genocides comparable, as you mentioned, to Rwanda, to Indonesia, big massacres that took place. And this one for political reasons, for economic relations, has been hidden for so long. And this is just the beginning. And it's an extremely important moment, not just for the people in Iran, but for the people around the world. So thank you so much for that. I'll just say a few words of what Safiya said in Farsi. Safiya Skandari که گفتن که ما در این خیلی خوشحاله که در اینجا شرکت تشکر میکنه از مینا هدی که دعوت کردن ایشون بیان در اینجا و گفتن که توضیح دادن که چطوری شوهر ایشون کریم نادری فیض‌آباد چگونه دستگیر شد چند سال قبل از سال 67. در حقیقت اون موقع فکر نمی‌کردن، وقتی بازخواست شده بودن فکر نمی‌کردن، خود کریم فکر نمی‌کرد که یعنی ممکن بود نره و ایشون مثل صفیه بهشون گفته بودن که نرین شما، صفیه میگه، ولی رفتن به خاطر اینکه فکر می‌کردن خب من کاری انجام ندادم و واقعیتش این بود، خیلی‌ها بودن که کاری انجام نداده بود. ولی وقتی که صفیه میگه که وقتی رفتن اونجا و اینا رو سردوندن برای مدت‌های مدیدی از این زندان به این زندان و رفتار خشونت‌آمیز می‌کردن و در یک ملاقات صفیه می‌بینه که آثار شکنجه رو گردن کریم هست و متوجه میشه که اتفاق بدی داره اتفاق میفته در اونجا، ولی خود کریم نمیخواست که نگران بکنه خانواده رو. در این حال بعدا میشنوم که بردن زندان اوین و 1.5 سال میگذره از این قضیه و کریم به خاطر کارهای خیلی عادی که مثل حمایت مالی جمع کردن برای فعالین، برای کمونیست، تو حزب کمونیست ایران فکر کنم ایشون گفتن که فعالیت میکردن، برای کوهنوردی، برای کارهایی که میرفتن و به خاطر این عملا نگرش داشته بودن و اینا فقط ملاقات‌های 20 دقیقه‌ای میتونستن بگیرن ولی در سال 67 یهویی ملاقات ها قطع میشه و شایعه رو میشنون که اعدام ها داره شروع میشه که باور نکردنی. و بعد خانواده تلاش میبرن کهریزک، اگه اشتباه نکنم کهریزک میبرن و لباسای شوهرشون رو تحویل میدن به ایشون و و میگن که و اینا صفیه میشنوه که اینا کریم جزء اولین دسته بود که اعدام شد و مقامات زندان میگن که شما نباید هیچ مراسم بزرگداشت بگیرین، نباید اصلا علنی اعلام بکنین، با سکوت. و بعداً صفیه و خانواده از خاوران متوجه میشن که چه جاییه و خیلی از خانواده ها در من نکته دیگه شما گفته بودیم عملاً 33 سال گذشته از این قضیه و یک انسان رو حیاتشو گرفتن و خانواده هایی رو بردن تو ماتم و بدبختی و مهمه که از نظر صفیه که ایشون گفتن که اینا باید پاسخگو باشن و خیلی خانواده هستن که میترسن الان هستن، حتی شاید این برنامه رو دارن میبینن که به خاطر اینکه زندگی و امکانات ممر معاششون گروگان گرفته بشه اگه شروع کنن حرف زدن. ولی در این حال گفتن که این امید میده به همه ما، حکومتی که هزاران نفر رو کشته و من به آقای مصداقی اجازه دادم که این لیگال اکشن، حرکت اقدام حقوقی منو بپذیرن، یعنی شما هم یعنی صفیه اسکندری هم دادخواهه و این شروع فقط یه شروعیه و هم که به همه ما امید میده. خیلی تشکر میکنم صفیه اسکندری عزیز. و I will now go to our next speaker, Marcus Wallina. Marcus Wallina, we are very delighted to have him here with us today. Marcus was born in 1982 in Jena and lives in Berlin, in Germany. He's a founding member of the Berlin Secularist Working Group, also known as LAG Säkulare Linke, of the German left-wing party Die Linke. And we are delighted to have Marcus with us here today. And please take the mic, Marcus. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak here tonight. I would like to continue a point that Ulrike brought up because she very rightly said that we need a change of European policy towards Iran. And I want to add the perspective of one of the major left-wing parties in Europe to that, to see what does this policy look like now, and how can we what options and also maybe what limitations do we have to change this policy within the current diplomatic, parliamentary, and maybe also activist frameworks. Just to make expectations here clear, I am here tonight just representing a certain group within my party, so I'm not here as like an official representative of the party leadership or anything like that, but I will do my best to build some, to see how we can build connections and use this evening tonight as a starting point for further joint initiatives and cooperations. Just a few words about Die Linke. It's an opposition party in Germany. It holds about 10% of the seats in the national parliament. This might change a bit in the upcoming elections this fall. And we also have 5 members of European Parliament representing our party, including Cornelia Ernst, who is the head of the European Parliament's delegation to Iran. Mina and I also had a talk with her about some of the issues presented tonight a few days ago. And I just want to give you a little run through of the current positions of my party regarding the situation in Iran. So our members in the German and European Parliament have repeatedly made statements and also started parliamentary initiatives with regards to the situation in Iran, where our general position is that we are in solidarity with the Iranian people in their struggle for democratic rights, but also their struggle for social security, economic stability. And we have repeatedly demanded that the Iranian regime should set all political prisoners free, that it should end the repression of the peaceful protests and end the use of the death penalty. Of course, with the recent election of Raisi, the conditions for changing this have gotten drastically worse. On the other hand, we are also demanding that the German government should stop all deportations of political refugees to Iran, because their safety cannot be guaranteed in Iran. However, my party also sees that in order to have any sort of influence on the political developments in Iran, the diplomatic dialogue with the government, with the regime, should be continued, and also that plans by the US government to create a regime change with military means should be strongly opposed. And on the other hand, we also are very much against the current economic sanctions by, especially by the American government, because we see that they mostly hurt the population and not so much the government. We are, however, in favor of sanctions against the government or against specific members of the government or the political caste in Iran. In this sense, we also currently think that the JCPOA should be sustained, because it's still the major leverage to have any influence on Iranian politics. However, so much for my party's official position. However, as Ulrike also has rightly pointed out, this strategy has been all but successful so far. So despite all efforts for dialogue, for diplomatic and trade relations, the human rights situation in Iran is getting worse, and the government is getting closer and closer to becoming a nuclear power. So the question remains, how can we improve our support for democratic and social and secularist and equal rights movements in Iran or within the Iranian opposition in exile? And how could we help also in raising awareness in German and European politics for events like the current Hamiednourid trial? And I would be very happy if this tonight could be the starting point for us to see how we can, actually, like how we can do specific practical steps in the direction of changing this policy. So much right now from me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Marcus, for that. And of course, this evening's program is seeking to see the kind of international perspective that you and Ulrike are providing to this important debate, and we are seeing it at both points of view, both the foreign policy issue, international politics, a European perspective, and also like Safia spoke, what it means, and Mestari spoke about for the justice-seeking movement, the movement for redress. Thank you so much for that. I'll just give a concise, just some of the key points that you just said in Farsi. آقای مارکوس گولینا که از یک بخش سکولار حزب چپ آلمان هستن به نام دی لینکه. ایشون گفتن که ادامه میدن همون صحبتایی که اولریکه بکر گفتن و اینکه چگونه میشه سیاستی که الان تو اروپا هست اینو نسبت به جمهوری اسلامی بشه اینو عوض کرد و گفتن که ایشون در اینجا در ظرفیت نماینده حزبشون صحبت نمی‌کنن، بلکه اون گروه معینی که گفتن گروه سکولار درون اون حزب دارن صحبت میکنن و یه توضیحاتی دارن در مورد این حزب چپ آلمان که حدود 10% تو آخرین انتخابات رأی آورده و نمایندگانی در مجلس داره، همینطور 5 نماینده اروپایی هم داره که یکیشون هم اسمش از کورنلیا ارنست که ایشون گفتن که هفته گذشته چند روز پیش با خانم مینا احدی و کورنلیا ارنست با هم یه جلسه‌ای داشتن اتفاقاً در مورد سیاست کشورهای اروپایی و مشخصاً آلمان در مورد نسبت به جمهوری اسلامی و ایشون گفتن که موضع حزب ما در مورد جمهوری اسلامی ایران کلاً اینطوری بوده که بیانیه دادیم و دخالتگری زیادی داشتیم، ولی مشخصا ما می‌خوایم همبستگی با مردم ایران اعلام بکنیم برای تغییرات دموکراتیک و اینکه برای رفاه اجتماعی تلاش‌ها و مبارزات مردم ایران، همینطور برای آزادی زندانیان سیاسی، لغو اعدام و خواستایی از این قبیل ازش حمایت میکنن و گفتن که این انتخابات اخیر که رئیسی به انتخاب در این مقام قرار گرفته شرایط رو سخت‌تر کرده در سطح بین‌المللی و اینکه اینا در این حال خواهان اینن که دیپورت پناهندگان ایرانی به ایران متوقف بشه و تلاشی که اینا فکر میکنن باید انجام داد حزب ایشون این هست که مراودات دیپلماتیک از نظر حزب این چپ آلمان باید با جمهوری اسلامی باید ادامه پیدا کنه، چون به نظر اینها یعنی به نظر این حزبشون که رژیم چنج در ایران نباید انجام بشه، یعنی از طریق حمله نظامی. همینطور مخالف تحریم‌های اقتصادی هستن چون فکر میکنن که ضربهش بیشتر به خود مردم در ایران وارد میشه. در این حال تحریم‌هایی که برای علیه خود دولت انجام میشه جمهوری اسلامی و علیه افرادی و نهادهایی در درون جمهوری اسلامی ازش حمایت میکنن و فکر میکنن که این برجام باید ادامه پیدا کنه، ولی در این حال این سیاستی که دولت‌های اروپایی دنبال کردن موفقیت آمیز نبود از نظر اینا و فکر میکنن که مسئله حقوق بشر و اینکه جمهوری اسلامی داره نزدیکتر میشه که به قدرت هسته‌ای دستیابی پیدا بکنه، این داره عکس اون سیاست داره کار میکنه و فکر میکنن که خب سوالی که میگن که چه کار میشه کرد و از نظر ایشون برنامه‌ای مثل امشب میتونه یه سرآغازی باشه برای تاثیرگذاری و تغییر دادن این سیاستی که دولت‌های اروپایی نسبت به جمهوری اسلامی داره.
Bahram, sorry to interrupt you. The new channel TV, they will stop on the right on the hour. So if Mina has to say a few words before they shut down the TV, I believe so. Sorry.
Okay, thank you very much. So thank you so much for that, Marcus. And now I go over to Mina Ahadi. Mina Ahadi, I'll just give a brief introduction. Is quite, is a long-time political activist and rights campaigner. And she's the founder of the International Committee Against Executions and the International Committee Against Stoning, and also a key founder of the German Central Council of Ex-Muslims. Mina Hadi is the recipient of many awards for her human rights activities and the fight for secularism, including the National Secular Society's Secularist of the Year Award. And Mina is quite well known in Iran and also in Germany for her staunch fights over many years, both in Iran and internationally and in Germany for against the death penalty, for saving a lot of lives, for actually being instrumental in the stopping of the stoning code in Iran, stoning rule in Iran, forcing the regime in Iran to suspend it. She's been involved in very high-profile campaigns, and it's really, we're delighted and very grateful for Mina Hadi to be with us today. And she's, of course, herself one of the organizers of this meeting. And I would like to invite Mina to speak now, please.
Dankeschön. Leider kann ich nicht so gut Englisch. Ich rede auf Deutsch. Ich bedanke mich sehr viel für die Leute, die, unsere Gäste hier haben Rede gehalten. Ich möchte nur sehr kurz zwei Punkte hier erklären. Erstens, wir reden auf meine Sicht über eine islamische Holocaust. Aber das ist nicht bekannt weltweit. Und man hört immer wieder, also ich war im Europäischen Parlament, ich war auch im Deutschen Parlament. Und wenn ich über 1988 gesprochen habe, habe ich schon gesehen, zum Beispiel Menschenrechtsbeauftragte von deutscher Regierung oder die Leute, die über Menschenrechte arbeiten, haben keine Ahnung gehabt. Und ich habe auch im Internet geguckt, es gibt sehr wenige Informationen. Aber heute zum Beispiel, wir haben gehört, Hamidennoorddi ist schon im Gefängnis in Stockholm. Und auf meine Sicht, das ist sehr, sehr wichtig, weil dieser ganze Prozess dauert ein Jahr. Und dort alle Leute weltweit, alle können schon sehen, was hat das islamische Regime mit Menschen, mit uns gemacht. Die Leute, die gegen dieses Regime waren und auch das ist auch sehr wichtig als eine Person. Zum Beispiel, ich habe auch diesen Prozess gesehen. Mein Mann wurde festgenommen und hingerichtet. Wir haben heute gehört von Safia Eskandari und auch mehrere Menschen. Also wir reden über tausende Menschen. Die islamische Regime hat diese Menschen hingerichtet und ermordet. Auf andere Seite aber wir dürften nicht darüber reden, also Menschen im Iran, normale Menschen. Ich war politisch aktiv, habe ich schon das gemacht gegen dieses Regime von Anfang an, aber die Eltern, die Mutter, Bruder und Schwester und wir auf andere Seite haben wir auch gehört, Herr Mestari hat gerade gesagt, wir sollten auch einen Kuchen kaufen und dort bringen, wir sollten auch Geld bezahlen und das war die islamische Regime. Also wir reden über politischer Islam. Wir reden über eine Bewegung, die unmenschlich, frauenfeindlich und sehr, sehr extrem war. Und wenn ich zum Beispiel in Europa war und habe ich schon, also ich sage immer wieder, wenn ich erste Steinigung im Iran gesehen habe, dann habe ich gesagt, warte Mina, wenn die Weltöffentlichkeit von so etwas hört, dann Uhren bleiben stehen, Fabriken bleiben stehen. Aber ich war in Europa, ich habe gehört, nein, Frau Ahadi, Iran ist ein islamisches Land. Also es gab Thesen und es gab auch sehr viel Propaganda. Sie kommen aus einem Land mit anderer Kultur. Angeblich Hinrichtung ist meine Kultur. Angeblich Steinigung war meine Kultur. Und enorme Menschenrechtsverletzung wurde hier als Kultur verkauft. Wir haben also mindestens schon seit 42 Jahren, ich kämpfe gegen diese islamische Barbarei, gegen islamische Regierung. Und wir haben auch in Europa sehr viel Problem gehabt, nämlich mit Regierungen, die immer wieder mit islamischen Regime zusammengearbeitet haben und mit Parteien oder Organisationen, die entweder also nicht sehr viel ernst genommen haben, alles was im Iran oder auch islamische Regime ist eine Regierung, spielt eine Rolle im Irak, in Jemen oder Syrien. Und auch in Europa haben wir diese politische Islam gesehen. Und dann haben wir zu tun gehabt mit einigen Organisationen oder Regierungen, die immer wieder gerechtfertigt haben, diese Politik, nämlich Zusammenarbeit mit islamischem Regime oder die haben Augen also zugemacht und überhaupt nicht darüber gesprochen. Gerade hat Markus Wolina gesprochen, also vor eine Woche, ich denke, ich habe mit Frau Ernst, also wir haben gesprochen und ich denke, also ich habe dort auch gesagt, jetzt sage ich auch klipp und klar, wir möchten keine Regime-Change. Ich habe auch dort gesagt, wir möchten gar keinen Krieg im Iran. Aber wenn die Menschen Millionen auf die Straße gehen, wenn so viele Menschen hat das islamische Regime umgebracht und gerade jetzt über Wasser ist große Demonstration im Iran und ich habe dort gesagt, wieso Europäische Parlament sagt gar nichts. Natürlich dort habe ich gehört, europäische Regierungen haben immer wieder mit Menschenrechtsorganisationen im Iran oder NGO-Organisationen gesprochen und haben auch zum Beispiel gegen Hinrichtung von zum Beispiel einige Menschen auch einen Protestbrief geschrieben. Aber das ist nicht alles und das bringt uns nicht weiter. Und letzte Zeit haben auch über diese Hinrichtungen gar nichts gesagt. Also, mein Punkt ist das. In Stockholm wird eine Person, eine sehr wichtige Person von islamischen Regime, Hamidnوردی, also es gibt ein Tribunal und Hamidnوردی war sehr, sehr wichtige Person im islamischen Regime und auch hat mit Raisi zusammengearbeitet. Schauen Sie diese Welt an. Auf einer Seite, ein Mörder ist jetzt Präsident im Iran, auf anderer Seite, wir haben gekämpft. Die Familie von ermordeten Menschen haben gekämpft. Mutter von Khawaran haben gekämpft. Und dann haben wir jetzt geschafft, abgesehen von Politik von europäischen Regierungen, wirklich haben Schritt für Schritt haben wir gekämpft. Und jetzt, es gibt ein Tribunal in Stockholm. Ich freue mich und ich denke, das muss ein Anfang sein. Und ich denke, wir müssen Raisi auch, also in eine Situation bringen, dass Raisi auch in ein Tribunal steht oder Khamenei, Rouhani und alle, wie die heißen. Also alle waren Mörder, Reformist oder konservativ. Also auf meine Sicht von Anfang an habe ich immer wieder gesagt, die sind eine Regierung. Und jetzt, ich denke, wir haben schon mit sehr viel Strebungen, mit sehr viel Problem geschafft. حمیدنوردی jetzt ist im Gefängnis und das freue ich mich und ich bedanke mich auch von euch, dass Sie heute hier waren und ich denke, unser Kampf geht weiter und wir möchten islamische Regime abschaffen. Menschen im Iran möchten das und unser Problem ist nicht nur Regierung und Hinrichtungen, sondern auch europäische Regierungen, die immer wieder islamische Regime geholfen haben. Das ist mein Punkt. Dankeschön.
Thank you so much for that, Mina.
میتونی ترجمه کنی یا خودم بگم فارسی؟
خودتون میخوام خواهش می‌کنم خلاصه بگین و I'd like to ask Mina to say give a summary in Farsi. She can do it much better than me.
خیلی ممنون. من اینجا گفتم که ما در مورد هولوکاست اسلامی حرف میزنیم، در مورد رژیمی حرف میزنیم که هزاران نفر رو کشته ولی متاسفانه در دنیا خیلی شناخته شده نیست. من وقتی رفتم پارلمان اروپا یا رفتم پارلمان آلمان سخنرانی کردم در مورد سال 67 نمایندگان پارلمان یا حتی کسایی که روی حقوق بشر کار میکردن خیلی اطلاعات نداشتن. تو اینترنت هم اطلاعات زیادی راجع بهش نیست. ولی گفتم که ما مبارزه کردیم و الان خوشبختانه حمیدنوردی تو دادگاه. دنیا باید ببینه اینا چی کردن. دنیا باید ببینه اینا زن حامله اعدام کردن، اینا بچه اعدام کردن، اینا وقتی عزیزان ما را کشتن از ما خواستن براشون شیرینی ببریم، پول گلوله را از ما خواستن. بنابراین ما در مورد جنبش اسلامی، جنبش وحشی اسلامی داریم حرف میزنیم و مبارزات خودمون این رو به اینجا کشونده که الان حمیدنوردی دستگیر شده و در این حال یک بخش مبارزه من و ما این بوده که سیاست دولت‌های اروپایی رو مورد نقد قرار بدیم. اینجا گفتم که من وقتی اولین سنگسار در ایران شد همیشه اینو میگم، فکر کردم و گفتم مینا صبر کن اگه دنیا بفهمه ساعت‌ها از حرکت میستن. ولی وقتی من اومدم اروپا شنیدم از سیاستمدارا که گفتن نه خانم احدی، ایران یک کشور اسلامیه، این فرهنگ شماست. فرهنگ من اعدام نبود و نیست. فرهنگ مردم ایران سنگسار نبوده و نیست و ما قدم به قدم مبارزه کردیم با این توضیحات. امروز نماینده بخش سکولار حزب چپ اینجا هست، آقای مارکوس ولینا، گفت که اینا در پارلمان اروپا هم 5 تا نماینده دارن و خانم کورنلیا ارنست مسئول رابطه با ایران از طرف اتحادیه اروپا. منم اینجا گفتم که چون ایشون گفتن که حزب چپ آلمان نمیخواد رژیم چنج، من گفتم ما هم رژیم چنج در ایران رو نمیخوایم، ما نمیخوایم حمله نظامی بشه به ایران، ولی در این حال ما معتقدیم که جمهوری اسلامی با اعدام و تنابدار و کمک دولت‌های غربی و سکوت اینا و مماشات اینا سر پا مونده. بنابراین من همونجا هم خانم کورنلیا ارنست رو خیلی شدید باش بحث کردم و مورد نقد قرار دادم. گفتم دولت‌های اروپایی و اتحادیه اروپا باید این مماشاتشون رو تموم کنن. اینکه میرم با یه حقوق بشری تو ایران حرف میزنم این پاسخ مسئله ما نیست. و الان به نظر من آخرین حرفم این بود که ببینید دنیا به کجا رسیده. یکیشون که قاتل رئیس جمهوره، یکیشون که قاتل گرفتیم تو زندانه و آقای مصداقی و بقیه دوستان دستشون درد نکنه داره محاکمه میشه. بنابراین این راه رو ما ادامه خواهیم داد. مردم ایران شعار سرنگونی جمهوری اسلامی رو دادن و ما از دولت‌های اروپایی تحت فشار میذاریم که دیگه کمک نکنن اینا سر پا بمونن و در این حال این شروع یک پروسه است. رئیسی باید محاکمه بشه، خامنه‌ای باید محاکمه بشه، روحانی باید محاکمه بشه و تمام کسانی که در طول این 42 سال آدم کشتن، چاپیدن مردم ایران رو. و به این معنا به نظر من این روز مهمیه. تبریک میگم به همه کسانی که کار کردن. خیلی ممنون.
خیلی متشکرم از شما مینا هدی عزیز. من I will just before I open up again for a 2-minute contribution for each of our speakers, just say a few words on behalf of the campaign that I myself coordinate, because it's related to some of the points raised at this meeting. I'm the coordinator of the international campaign to boycott the Islamic regime of Iran. And just want to clarify and say what we mean by that. What we are fighting for and campaigning on is the political and diplomatic boycott of the Iranian regime, its political isolation internationally. And this means political boycott, arms embargo, arms boycott, cultural boycott, and sports boycott, just as was done towards the apartheid regime in South Africa, racist apartheid regime in South Africa. And it was quite very effective, that international campaign, the anti-apartheid campaign. And we have a gender apartheid in Iran, Islamic apartheid regime in Iran, which is, committed horrendous crimes against humanity. And all of these are documented. And what this conference is one of those. We are talking about one aspect of those crimes, one moment, the 1988 massacre of political prisoners in Iran. So in our campaign, we are against economic sanctions, just to respond to one of the points Marcus mentioned. We are against economic sanctions because we feel that it really hurts the people, just as the reason Marcus mentioned. And we are for the political sanction of the Iranian regime, and even sanctions against its particular institutions, particular individuals, the terrorists of the regime, which conduct terrorism abroad. And we should remember that this regime abducts people and opposition activists abroad, tries to take them to Iran, has been assassinating them on European soil. And we just heard recently about the attempt to abduct the journalist and political activist Masih Alinejad on US soil. So this is the kind of regime we are dealing with. And that's why in our campaign we say, don't recognize this regime, don't grant political and diplomatic recognition to this regime, because that grants political legitimacy to this regime. And if this regime can be isolated, should not be treated as a normal regime, then the issues like the nuclear issue and many other issues, regional issues, the human rights issues, can be resolved by pressurizing the government. Because there is one secret here which should be emphasized, and that is the struggle of the people in Iran. People in Iran already are involved in a massive struggle to get rid of the regime in Iran. And if the world doesn't recognize this regime, doesn't appease it, and doesn't grant it legitimacy by continuing political relations with it, that will make the task of the people in Iran much easier. And that is just wanted to clarify, the position of a lot of the activists in Iran and what the people of Iran are really demanding. Thank you so much for that. And I'd like to ask Ulrike if she wants to add anything to any of the speakers have said, or she would like to add anything she would like to add herself, or whatever. You have 2 minutes, Ulrike.
Okay, thank you. I think it is very important, Mina, that the world recognizes how massive the human rights crimes of the Iranian regime are. Nevertheless, I think it's wrong to use the word Holocaust, because that is something different. I would like to say that in German to Mina directly. Ich finde das sehr wichtig, Mina. Ich sehe das so genauso wie du. Die Welt muss erkennen, wie massiv die Menschenrechtsverbrechen des iranischen Regimes sind. Und ich würde trotzdem nicht von einem Holocaust sprechen, weil das einfach was ganz anderes ist und weil man da in eine komische Diskussion kommt, wo man Sachen vergleicht, und das kann man einfach nicht vergleichen. Aber ich finde, ich gebe dir recht, dass der Charakter der Massenhinrichtung des Jahres 1988 nicht einmal ansatzweise verstanden worden ist im Bewusstsein Europas. Und das muss sich ändern, damit auf dieser Basis dann auch eine andere, angemessene Politik gegenüber dem Iran geführt werden kann. And I hope that this process against Hamidnouri is only the beginning of a longer process of coming to terms with the enormous crimes committed by the Iranian regime. I think it is already an important signal to the world, to the people of Iran, but also to those abroad here in Europe who work with the regime. And I hope that politicians also begin to understand that they are stabilizing a regime that has no future. And we see here in Germany also a trial now that is taking place in Koblenz since April 2021 against a representative of the Syrian regime. And I think this is also a trial that makes it clear that it's possible to punish human crimes against humanity in other countries like Iran, like Syria, and that we should be able to make it clear that these people have no safe haven here in Europe, and that they will face a punishment here, and if they have made crimes against humanity abroad in Iran or in Syria. And these trials should be a signal that no one feels safe here from the regime's executioners here in Europe. And we should organize to bring people to trial who travel here, to come here. And ultimately, that must also be a trial of Ibrahim Raisi, who is responsible for the murder of tens of thousands of people in Iran. And maybe we can, as Marcus suggested, think about ways to organize in this respect so that everybody understands that Europe is not a safe haven for those who committed crimes in Iran, and that human rights are taken seriously here in the future, at least. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks so much for that, Ulrike. And I just realized, I'm aware of the time, we are running out of time. So I think we'll have to skip the 1 minute I had promised at the beginning. So this is going to be the last round. And so I can ask now Safiya to say a few words, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. I need to say thank you for Marcus and Ulrike for being here, and also Bahram Surush, thank you very much. You know, just I would like to say very fast two important things. One of them is there are a lot of questions. They say, why after 33 years you start talking about some important, it's really important things. After years, just you start talk about that. And I say, yes, that's important, but why I didn't talk about that? As I mentioned in my talk, in every situation, we were threatened by government in different situations. From beginning, when they arrested someone, when they send it to prison, when we want to do something, even when they executed that person. And happened during all of our life, even when we want to go to Havaran, arrested again. And so it's every time it was in our life and still is going on. And another reason is the regime in Iran has a control of all the media, and it's a massive dictatorship. Recently, it's much better because as a technology, internet, WhatsApp, it's a different situation. But so if you want search, I believe Ulrike said your professional job is about history and research. And so you can find something like that. Tonight you find a lot of information. I'm pretty sure Mina Hadi already gave you a lot of information as well. But you can find evidence, you can find information, what's happened. And the other thing is really, really important. I'm glad that I met you and respect to your word. It's, raise awareness in the Europe. And it's an opportunity to raise our voice and pass the information and share the information in any situation, in any place. And so it's really important because this, the government didn't finish his crime active. It still is going on. Still, if you follow the news, still they are doing that. And it's a live, I believe, history. There are a lot of information and they have to stop that. And I believe you can help a lot. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Safiya. And now I go to Marcus. Marcus Wallina, please.
Thanks. I will try to keep this as brief as possible. I think it is very important, especially for us in Europe, to recognize the severity of the repression and human rights violations by the Iranian government. And it's especially important within the European left wing to discard of these illusions about Iran being a sort of anti-imperialist power or whatever, only because of its conflict with the US. And I think this must be a major objective for us if we want to garner real also support in the civic societies in Europe, and also within NGOs, within the parliamentary, but also non-parliamentary left, to really give a realistic view of the Iranian regime and its role with regards to human rights violations, but also with regards to the destabilization of the whole region. And I think we still have a lot of work to do there in order to destroy all these illusions.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Marcus. And finally, Mina Hadi.
Okay, ich bedanke mich noch einmal, dass Sie alle hier waren. Danke Ulrike, danke Markus und danke Safia. Also soweit Holocaust betrifft, du hast recht, es gibt sehr große Diskussionen in Deutschland, aber im iranischen Publikum, das wird sehr oft verwendet, islamischer Holocaust. Du hast recht, in Deutschland, ich passe immer auf. Und auf anderer Seite, Markus, danke, dass du hier warst und du hast auch über Linken gesprochen. Also ich bin selbst link, habe ich auch mit Frau Ernst, wenn ich gesprochen habe, habe ich gesagt, ich bin Mitglied Arbeiterkommunistische Partei Iran. Und ich denke, also links sein ist und war immer für uns, wir sind für Freiheit, wir sind für Gleichheit und wir sind gegen Armut und alles. Und besonders wenn enorme Menschenrechtsverletzungen gibt, dann wir sind in erster Reihe gegen Steinigung, gegen Todesstrafe. Aber leider, das hat etwas anderes immer wieder passiert. Und du hast auch gesprochen, Anti-Imperialist sein angeblich ist sehr wichtig als zum Beispiel diese Aktivität. Also meine Aktivität ist ganz anderes als einige Linken. Aber trotz alles, danke, dass du hier warst und die säkulare Linken jetzt arbeiten auch mit uns sehr gut. Also ich freue mich und ich denke, das ist schon eine Tendenz weltweit. Menschen haben im Iran gekämpft und sehr viele Organisationen jetzt sehen genau an, im Iran, also was los ist. Menschen im Iran möchten Freiheit, Gleichheit und eine bessere Zukunft. Und ich denke, wir müssen alle zusammenhalten und diesen Menschen helfen. Dankeschön.
Thanks so much, Mina Hadi. So I'll just say in conclusion, thank you very much to our speakers for taking part in this important conference. And on a very important day, on a day when the Swedish prosecutors formally indicted Hamidnoury. And just as to echo what the speakers have said, that this could be the beginning of the trial and prosecution of other perpetrators of crimes against humanity within the Islamic Republic in Iran. And I would like to thank the audience who have followed this program. And just say in فارسی as well، خیلی متشکرم از تمام شرکت کنندگان این برنامه کنفرانس مهم، به ویژه در این روز خیلی مهمی، روزی که درش دادستانی سوئد کفرخواست رسمی علیه حمیدنوری رو به خاطر جنایاتی که در تابستان 67 مرتکب شده، نقشش در اون اعلام کرد و سخنرانان در برنامه امروز گفتند که چگونه این میتونه سرآغاز حرکت مهمی باشه برای به محاکمه کشاندن تمام سران حکومت جمهوری اسلامی و اولینش ابراهیم رئیسی جلاد که اخیراً جمهوری اسلامی و شخص خامنه‌ای منتسبش کرد به ریاست جمهوری اسلامی. و این روز خوبیه و تبریک میگم از طرف کمیته بین‌المللی علیه اعدام. این اتفاقی داره میفته و تبریک میگم به همه فعالین که سالها جنگیدن برای این کار، از همان بعد به قدرت رسیدن این حکومت برای سرنگونی اون و برای دادخواهی و به محاکمه کشاندن سران جمهوری اسلامی. و تشکر میکنم از بینندگان کانال جدید برای همراهیتون با